I stood in my childhood bedroom staring at the legal documents in my trembling hands. The words Certificate of Disownment seemed to burn through the expensive letterhead paper. My father Gerald adjusted his gold cufflinks and spoke without looking at me. "This is our final decision, Ambrose. After 22 years of disappointment, we're cutting all ties." My mother Patricia smoothed her pearl necklace and added coldly, "You've brought nothing but shame to our family name." The papers made it official. I was no longer their son, no longer heir to anything. What they didn't know was that hidden in my desk drawer lay a signed contract that would change everything in 72 hours at graduation. Growing up in our sprawling colonial home in Greenwich, Connecticut, I learned early that love in the Harrison family came with conditions. Gerald, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, and Patricia, who chaired every charity board that mattered, had built their entire identity around success and appearances. My older brother Marcus had fulfilled every expectation perfectly. Valedictorian Harvard pre-med, now a successful cardiac surgeon engaged to a senator's daughter. Then there was me. From the time I could walk, I was compared to Marcus and found lacking. While he excelled in classical piano, I gravitated toward computer games. When he brought home perfect report cards, mine showed, as in computer science but B's in everything else. Gerald would shake his head during family dinners, announcing to anyone who would listen that he didn't understand where he went wrong with his younger son. The worst part wasn't the constant criticism, it was being systematically erased from family history. During Marcus's medical school graduation, I was told to stay home because there wasn't enough room in the car. When Patricia hosted her annual Christmas party for Connecticut's elite, I was sent to my room so I wouldn't embarrass them in front of important guests. Family photos lined the hallway showcasing Marcus's achievements, while my accomplishments were nowhere to be found. The financial manipulation started during my sophomore year of college. While Marcus received unlimited funds for medical school, my parents threatened to cut off my tuition every time I refused to switch from computer science to a more respectable major. I took on 3 part-time jobs to pay for my education, working nights at a 24-hour diner, weekends at a computer repair shop, and any spare moment tutoring younger students. During my junior year, the communication stopped entirely. Gerald and Patricia would only speak to me through Marcus, treating me like a stranger in my own home. Family dinners became exercises in humiliation, where they would discuss my failures as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Marcus tells us your grades are still disappointing," Patricia would announce while passing the roast beef. "Gerald thinks you should consider transferring to community college." The only person who ever believed in me was my grandmother, Rose Gerald's. Mother who lived in the guest house behind our property. She would sneak me homemade cookies and tell me stories about her own father, who built a business empire from nothing. "Intelligence comes in many forms, sweetheart," she would whisper during our secret conversations. "Don't let them convince you that their way is the only way to succeed." When Grandma Rose passed away during the spring semester of my junior year, I lost my only advocate. The funeral was another exercise in family politics where I was relegated to the back row while Marcus delivered a beautiful eulogy. I wasn't even allowed to speak despite being the grandchild who spent the most time with her during her final months. That night alone in my dorm room, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family couldn't see my worth, I would prove it in a way that would be impossible to ignore. I just had no idea how prophetic that decision would become. The months following Grandma Rose's death were the loneliest of my life. I threw myself into my studies, spending every free moment in the computer lab, working on projects that challenged everything I thought I knew about technology. My grades improved dramatically, but my parents attributed this to Marcus's intervention rather than my own dedication. The disownment papers I now held weren't a surprise. They were the culmination of years of calculated rejection. What shocked me was discovering they had been planned for months. Earlier that week, while looking for tax documents in Gerald's home office, I found detailed notes from family meetings I never knew existed. Page after page documented their decision-making process, complete with legal consultations about the most efficient way to remove me from their will and family trust. Subject: Ambrose situation. Read one email from Gerald to his attorney. Patricia and I agree that waiting until after graduation minimizes public embarrassment while ensuring clean separation. The boy has shown no signs of improvement despite our efforts. Another document outlined their financial calculations, determining exactly how much money they would save by cutting me off completely. They had even researched whether my student loans would become their responsibility if they disowned me before graduation. Reading those cold clinical assessments of my worth as a human being felt like being stabbed in the chest repeatedly. These weren't decisions made in anger or frustration. They were calculated business moves designed to protect their reputation and assets. As I sat in my childhood bedroom holding those disownment papers, I realized that everything I had suffered was about to be worth it. In 3 days at graduation, my family would discover that while they were planning my destruction, I was building something that would make them question everything they thought they knew about success, failure, and the son they had so carelessly thrown away. While my parents spent family dinners discussing my failures, I was revolutionizing artificial intelligence in ways they couldn't begin to comprehend. It started during my sophomore year when Dr. Elena Rodriguez, my computer science professor, introduced me to machine learning concepts that most students found impossibly complex. Something about the mathematical elegance of predictive algorithms spoke to me on a level that felt almost spiritual. Dr. Rodriguez became the mentor I never had at home. A brilliant woman who had immigrated from Mexico and earned her PhD from MIT, she recognized something in my approach to problem solving that others missed. You see patterns where others see chaos. Ambrose, she told me after I solved a particularly challenging assignment in half the expected time. That's not just intelligence, and that's vision. Late nights in the computer lab became my sanctuary. While other students attended parties or went home for family dinners, I worked on developing software that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. The initial concept emerged from a statistics project where I analyzed historical stock data and noticed patterns that traditional algorithms missed entirely. The breakthrough came during a particularly brutal winter week when my parents had threatened once again to cut off my tuition. Frustrated and exhausted, I approached the market prediction problem from a completely different angle. Instead of focusing on numerical data alone, I began incorporating social media sentiment news analysis and even weather patterns into my algorithms. The results were staggering. My software could predict market movements with 87% accuracy, outperforming every existing system by enormous margins. Dr. Rodriguez was speechless when I showed her the test results. "Ambrose, do you understand what you've created?" she asked, staring at the screens displaying impossible numbers. "This could change everything about how financial markets operate." The development process consumed my life in the best possible way. Every spare moment was spent refining algorithms, testing new variables, and pushing the boundaries of what machine learning could accomplish. I slept 4 hours a night and survived on coffee and determination, driven by a vision that I could barely articulate but knew was revolutionary. My relationship with Sarah Chen, a fellow computer science student, blossomed during those intense months. She was the only person who knew about my project and understood the significance of what I was building. Sarah possessed the kind of brilliant analytical mind that could follow my most complex explanations while providing insights that made everything clearer. "You're not just creating software," she told me during one of our midnight coding sessions. "You're building a crystal ball that actually works." Her faith in my abilities meant more than any family approval ever could. She believed in me when I could barely believe in myself. The careful balancing act of maintaining average grades while developing revolutionary technology became an art form. I deliberately performed just well enough to avoid attention while pouring my real energy into the project that mattered. My parents interpreted my modest academic performance as confirmation of their low expectations, never suspecting that their disappointing son was creating something that would eventually be valued in the tens of millions. Initial interest from major technology companies started during my junior year. Word about my software spread through academic conferences where Dr. Rodriguez presented papers on machine learning innovations. Venture capitalists and tech industry executives began reaching out through carefully worded emails that hinted at enormous potential without making specific promises. The most intriguing contact came from TechVision Industries, a company led by CEO Jonathan Hart, whose reputation for identifying breakthrough technologies was legendary. Hart's initial email was deceptively simple. "I understand you've developed something interesting. Would you be interested in a conversation?" That conversation led to months of secretive meetings, non-disclosure agreements, and technical demonstrations that left seasoned industry professionals speechless. Hart himself attended several presentations, asking probing questions that revealed his deep understanding of both technology and business implications. "What you've built isn't just software," Hart told me after a particularly intense demonstration. "It's a new way of seeing the future. The question is whether you're prepared for what that kind of power means." The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family lectured me about responsibility and success, I was navigating negotiations with some of the most powerful people in the technology industry. Every meeting required careful scheduling around my class schedule and family obligations, creating a double life that felt increasingly surreal. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand the legal and business implications of what I had created. She connected me with intellectual property attorneys and business advisors who could protect my interests while ensuring the technology reached its full potential. "Brilliant inventors who don't understand business often lose everything," she warned. "Make sure you maintain control of what you've built." The months of secrecy were emotionally exhausting, but absolutely necessary. I knew that revealing my project prematurely would invite interference from my family, who would either try to take credit for my success or find ways to sabotage it. Better to let them continue believing their narrative about my failures, while I prepared to demonstrate exactly how wrong they had been. As graduation approached and my family's emotional abuse intensified, I found strength in knowing that everything was about to change. The contract hidden in my desk drawer represented more than just financial security. It was proof that my vision, my dedication, and my refusal to conform to their expectations had been absolutely correct. The night before I received the Disownment papers, I had signed the final agreements with TechVision Industries. $15 million for my software plus ongoing royalties that could potentially reach into the hundreds of millions. My parents' timing couldn't have been more perfect or more ironic. The 6 months of negotiations with TechVision Industries tested every skill I had developed in handling pressure and uncertainty. Jonathan Hart's team included some of the most aggressive business minds in Silicon Valley, and they weren't interested in making a naive college student wealthy without ensuring they received maximum value in return. My initial meetings took place in anonymous conference rooms in Manhattan office buildings, carefully scheduled during my supposed study sessions. Diana Foster, the corporate attorney Dr. Rodriguez connected me with, became my lifeline during this process. A sharp-witted woman in her 40s who had negotiated deals worth billions, she taught me that intellectual property law was warfare disguised as paperwork. "They respect you because your technology is revolutionary," Diana explained during one of our strategy sessions. "But they'll destroy you if you show weakness or naivety." Every word in these contracts matters because millions of dollars hang in the balance. The back-and-forth process of protecting my innovations while proving their commercial viability felt like playing chess against grandmasters. TechVision wanted extensive rights to modify and expand my software, while I insisted on maintaining creative control and a significant ownership stake. Hart's negotiators pushed for exclusive licensing agreements that would have essentially made me an employee rather than a partner. "You're thinking too small," Ambrose, Hart told me during a particularly intense negotiation session. This technology could reshape entire industries. But that only happens if you're willing to think beyond academic projects and consider real-world applications. The mounting pressure coincided perfectly with escalating tensions at home. As graduation approached, my parents' emotional abuse reached new levels of cruelty. They had apparently decided that their final months with me should be spent ensuring I understood exactly how disappointed they were in everything I represented. Gerald began making pointed comments about successful families and their accomplished children during every conversation. "The Williamson boy just graduated from Harvard Law," he would announce over breakfast. "His parents must be so proud to have raised a son who achieved something meaningful." Patricia's approach was more subtle but equally devastating. She would sigh heavily whenever I entered a room, as if my presence caused her physical pain. Her phone conversations with friends always seemed to happen when I was within earshot discussing other families' successful children while conspicuously avoiding any mention of her own sons. The most terrifying moment in the entire process came during my spring break, when everything I had worked for nearly disappeared overnight. Megatech Corporation, one of TechVision's primary competitors, had apparently learned about my software through corporate intelligence networks that operated in legal gray areas. I discovered the attempted theft when Sarah noticed unusual activity on my university network accounts. Someone had been trying to access my research files using sophisticated hacking techniques that suggested professional-level corporate espionage. The realization that a major corporation was actively trying to steal my work felt like being targeted by forces I barely understood. "This is what happens when you create something truly valuable," Diana explained during an emergency conference call. "Companies worth hundreds of billions don't hesitate to steal intellectual property if they think they can get away with it." The following week became a crash course in cybersecurity warfare. TechVision's security team worked around the clock to protect my data while building legal cases against Megatech's illegal activities. I spent sleepless nights in secure locations watching experts analyze the attempted theft while wondering if my entire future had been destroyed. Dr. Rodriguez provided crucial support during this crisis, connecting me with university resources and ensuring my academic obligations didn't suffer while I dealt with corporate warfare. "You're learning lessons about business and competition that most people never encounter," she told me. "This experience will make you stronger regardless of the outcome." Sarah proved herself to be far more than just emotional support during this period. Her technical expertise helped identify security vulnerabilities in my systems, and her analytical skills contributed to developing protection strategies that kept my work safe. Having someone who understood both the technology and the stakes made the isolation bearable. The emotional toll of fighting a major corporation while dealing with family rejection pushed me to my breaking points multiple times. There were nights when I seriously considered abandoning the entire project and accepting my parents' assessment that I was destined for failure. The pressure of keeping everything secret while negotiating million-dollar deals felt impossibly heavy. The turning point came when TechVision's security team definitively proved that Megatech had attempted corporate theft and began pursuing legal action. Not only was my technology safe, but the attempted theft actually strengthened my negotiating position by demonstrating just how valuable my innovations were to the industry. When your competitors are willing to risk criminal charges to steal your work, Hart told me with obvious satisfaction, that tells you everything you need to know about its market value. The final contract negotiations happened during the same week my parents were finalizing their disownment papers. While Gerald consulted with attorneys about the most efficient way to remove me from their family, I was signing agreements that would make me financially independent for life. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. My parents had spent months planning to cut me off from what they considered substantial family wealth, never imagining that their disappointing son had already secured a fortune that dwarfed their own assets. The night before graduation, I sat in my dorm room holding two documents that represented completely different futures. The disownment papers my parents had presented represented their final verdict on my worth as their son. The Tech Vision contract represented validation that my vision dedication and refusal to conform had been absolutely correct. In less than 24 hours, my family would discover that while they were planning my humiliation, I had been building something that would change all our lives forever. Graduation morning arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made Connecticut look like a postcard, but the atmosphere in our house felt like a funeral. Patricia moved through her morning routine with mechanical precision, selecting her outfit as if choosing armor for battle. She settled on a navy blue dress with matching pearls, the uniform of upper-class respectability. Gerald emerged from his study wearing his most expensive suit, the one he reserved for court appearances in high-profile cases. His demeanor suggested he was attending an obligation, rather than celebrating his son's academic achievement. The breakfast table conversation focused entirely on logistics and timing, as if I were an inconvenient appointment they needed to manage efficiently. "We'll sit in the family section because appearances matter," Patricia announced while applying lipstick with surgical precision. "After the ceremony, we leave immediately. No reception, no photographs, no lingering conversations with other families." Marcus arrived with his fiancée Jennifer, both looking uncomfortable with the family dynamics they were witnessing. Jennifer, a genuinely kind person who had always tried to include me in conversations, seemed confused by the obvious tension. Marcus had clearly briefed her about the disownment, but seeing it play out in person was different from hearing about it secondhand. "This feels wrong," Jennifer whispered to Marcus while our parents prepared to leave. "He's graduating from college. Shouldn't this be a celebration?" The drive to campus happened in complete silence with me sitting alone in the back seat, like a prisoner being transported to sentencing. My parents spoke quietly to each other about parking arrangements and seating logistics, discussing my graduation as if it were a business meeting they needed to endure. The university campus buzzed with excitement as hundreds of families gathered for the ceremony. Everywhere I looked, parents beamed with pride while taking countless photos of their graduates. The contrast with my own family situation felt almost surreal, like watching a movie about normal people from inside a parallel universe, where love came with impossible conditions. Our seating assignment placed us in the third row of the family section, close enough to the stage that every reaction would be visible to other attendees. Patricia smiled stiffly at acquaintances while Gerald checked his watch, repeatedly making it obvious that he had better places to be. Extended family members had driven in from various parts of New England, including my father's brother Thomas and his wife Carol, along with several cousins who had heard rumors about family tensions but didn't understand the full situation. Their presence added another layer of complexity as Gerald and Patricia had to maintain appearances while dealing with their own internal conflicts. The ceremony began with traditional academic pageantry that felt both magnificent and meaningless. Hundreds of graduates processed across the stage, while families cheered and cameras flashed. The whole spectacle represented everything my parents claimed to value about achievement and recognition, yet they sat frozen in their seats like statues. Dean Williams delivered an inspiring speech about the graduating class's potential to change the world through innovation and dedication. His words about students who had overcome obstacles and pursued their passions felt like they were directed specifically at me, though I knew that was impossible. The first surprise came when Dean Williams announced the Innovation Excellence Award presented annually to the student whose research demonstrated the greatest potential for real-world impact. This award wasn't mentioned in the graduation program, and I'd never heard of it before. This year's recipient has developed technology that has already attracted attention from leading industry professionals, the dean announced. His work represents the kind of forward-thinking innovation that defines our institution's commitment to excellence. My heart started racing as I realized what was happening. Dr. Rodriguez had apparently nominated me for recognition I never knew existed. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more devastating for my family's carefully maintained narrative. The Innovation Excellence Award goes to Ambrose for his groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. The words echoed across the entire graduation venue through strategically placed speakers that ensured every person in attendance heard them clearly. Time seemed to slow as I processed the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't just recognition. It was public validation of everything my parents had dismissed and rejected. Patricia's face went completely white, as if someone had drained all the blood from her body in an instant. Gerald's mouth fell open slightly, the first genuine emotion I had seen from him all day. Around us, extended family members turned to stare, with expressions ranging from confusion to accusation. The walk to the podium felt like floating through a dream where everything had been reversed. Hundreds of families applauded while my own parents sat motionless, unable to process what they were witnessing. The contrast between the audience's enthusiasm and my family's shock was visible to anyone paying attention. Dr. Rodriguez beamed from the faculty section, her pride radiating across the entire venue. Sarah cheered from the student section, tears of joy streaming down her face. The support from people who actually knew my work felt overwhelming after years of family rejection. My acceptance speech was brief but heartfelt. This recognition belongs to everyone who believed in pursuing innovation even when others couldn't see the value. I said, looking directly at Dr. Rodriguez while pointedly avoiding my family's section. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we refuse to accept limitations imposed by people who don't understand our vision. The applause that followed felt like vindication for every night I'd worked alone in the computer lab while my family dismissed my efforts as worthless. For the first time in my life, I was receiving public recognition for achievements my parents couldn't deny or minimize. When I returned to my seat, the extended family members immediately surrounded Gerald and Patricia with whispered questions. "Why didn't you tell us Ambrose won an award?" Aunt Carol demanded. "We had no idea he was working on anything important." The explanations my parents attempted were painful to witness. They stammered through responses about being humble and not wanting to boast, while their relatives grew increasingly suspicious about why they had been kept in the dark about such significant achievements. But the Innovation Excellence Award was just the beginning. As I settled back into my seat, Dean Williams returned to the podium with another announcement that would change everything even more dramatically. "We have a special guest today who wanted to address our graduates," he announced. "Please welcome Jonathan Hart, Chief Executive Officer of Tech Vision Industries." The name hit my parents like a physical blow. Gerald recognized Hart immediately from business publications and news coverage. Patricia's careful composure cracked as she realized that one of the most powerful technology executives in America was about to address her son's graduating class. As Hart approached the podium with confident strides, I knew that everything my family believed about success, failure, and their disappointing son was about to be completely destroyed. Jonathan Hart commanded attention the moment he stepped onto the stage. At 55 years old, he possessed the kind of presence that came from decades of making decisions worth billions of dollars. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went, a technology visionary who had transformed multiple industries and created thousands of jobs. The audience fell silent as Hart adjusted the microphone and surveyed the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to addressing world leaders and industry titans. Local television crews had arrived to cover the graduation ceremony, but Hart's unexpected presence elevated the event to regional news significance. Class of 2024. Hart began with a voice that carried natural authority. You are entering a world that needs your innovation more than ever before. Technology moves faster than most people can comprehend, and the solutions to tomorrow's challenges will come from minds that refuse to accept conventional limitations. Gerald's face had taken on an ashen quality as he processed the implications of Hart's presence. Patricia gripped her purse handle so tightly that her knuckles showed white against her tanned skin. Around us, extended family members whispered excitedly about having such a distinguished speaker at their nephew's graduation. Throughout my career, I have had the privilege of working with extraordinary innovators who see possibilities where others see problems. Hart continued his words carrying weight that came from decades of successful partnerships. Today, I want to tell you about one of those innovators, a young man whose vision and dedication represent everything we hope to see from the next generation of leaders. The building anticipation in Hart's speech style was masterful, drawing every person in the audience deeper into his narrative. Camera operators adjusted their positions to capture the crowd's reactions unconsciously, creating documentation that would be replayed countless times. 6 months ago, I was introduced to technology that challenged everything I thought I knew about artificial intelligence and market prediction. Hart revealed his voice, growing more animated with each sentence. The sophistication and innovation displayed in this work surpassed systems developed by teams of experienced professionals with unlimited budgets. I could feel my parents' growing panic without even looking at them. The pieces were falling into place in ways they couldn't prevent or control. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, his medical training helping him recognize symptoms of shock in our parents' physical responses. What impressed me most wasn't just the technical brilliance, Hart continued, but the dedication and vision required to develop such revolutionary concepts while managing the demands of undergraduate education. This young man worked countless hours perfecting algorithms that will change how we understand market behavior. Jennifer grabbed Marcus's arm, sensing the family drama unfolding around her, even without understanding the specific details. The extended family members had stopped whispering and were listening with rapt attention, beginning to suspect that Hart's speech might be connected to their nephew in ways they couldn't yet fathom. That young innovator is sitting among you today, Jens, Hart announced, pausing for dramatic effect that sent ripples of excitement through the audience. Ambrose Harrison, would you please join me on stage? The explosion of applause that followed felt like thunder rolling across the entire venue. Hundreds of families cheered, while local television cameras swung toward my section, capturing every moment of what was clearly becoming a significant news story. Patricia's careful composure completely collapsed. Tears of humiliation and shock streamed down her cheeks as she realized that her publicly disowned son was being celebrated by one of America's most successful entrepreneurs. Gerald sat frozen like a statue, his legal mind racing to understand how everything he believed had been so completely wrong. The walk back to the stage felt entirely different this time. Instead of surprise recognition for academic achievement, this represented validation of my life's work by someone whose opinion carried enormous weight throughout the business world. The applause continued as Hart waited for me with a broad smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hart announced as I reached the podium, "I am proud to announce that TechVision Industries has acquired the exclusive rights to Ambrose's revolutionary artificial intelligence technology. This partnership represents a $15 million investment in innovation that will transform how financial markets operate." The gasps from the audience were audible throughout the venue. $15 million was more money than most families could imagine, and the public announcement transformed my status from graduating student to legitimate business success in a single moment. Hart continued with obvious enthusiasm. "Ambrose will retain significant ongoing royalties as our technology partner and his innovations will form the foundation of TechVision's next generation of analytical tools. This represents exactly the kind of forward-thinking partnership that drives real progress. The contract signing ceremony that followed happened live on stage with cameras documenting every signature and handshake. Hart had obviously planned this moment for maximum impact, understanding that public recognition would be worth more than any private acknowledgement. The formal announcement will be distributed to major business publications this afternoon, Hart explained to the audience. But I wanted this graduating class to be the first to witness the beginning of what I believe will be a revolutionary partnership. As we concluded the ceremony and I returned to my seat for the final time, the transformation in my family section was complete. Gerald and Patricia sat in stunned silence while relatives bombarded them with questions about why they had never mentioned their son's business achievements. "A $15 million deal," Uncle Thomas demanded in a voice that carried across several rows. "How did you not think this was worth mentioning to the family?" The attempted explanations that followed were painful to witness. My parents stumbled through responses about confidentiality and business discretion, but their relatives' expressions showed growing suspicion about the real reason they had been kept uninformed about such extraordinary achievements. Marcus tried to support our parents by suggesting that family humility explained their silence, but Jennifer's questions became increasingly pointed. "You never said anything about Ambrose working with technology companies," she whispered urgently. "How could you not know about something this significant?" The local television reporters had surrounded our section immediately after the ceremony, seeking interviews with family members of the sudden business celebrity. Their questions exposed the complete breakdown in family communication that my parents had tried to hide. "How does it feel to have raised such a successful entrepreneur?" one reporter asked Gerald directly. "You must be incredibly proud of Ambrose's achievements." The forced smile Gerald attempted looked more like a grimace as he struggled to find appropriate responses. "We've always supported his interests." He managed the words sounding hollow even to him. But the reporter's follow-up question revealed that someone had been doing research into our family situation. "There are reports that disownment papers were filed just days ago," she pressed. "Can you comment on the timing of that legal action relative to today's business announcement?" The blood drained from Patricia's face as she realized their private family decisions had become public knowledge. The carefully maintained facade of respectable family success was crumbling in real-time broadcast live to regional television audiences. As the crowd began to disperse and my parents faced the impossible task of explaining their actions to both family and media, I finally understood what true victory felt like. This wasn't just financial success or public recognition. It was complete vindication of every choice I had made despite their opposition. The humiliation on their faces wasn't cruel satisfaction for me, but rather profound sadness that they had chosen rejection over understanding appearances, over substance and control over love. They had created this moment through years of calculated cruelty, and now they would face the consequences of underestimating the son they had thrown away. The immediate aftermath of Hart's announcement transformed the graduation venue into controlled chaos. News crews expanded their coverage as word spread about the extraordinary business partnership, while families and university officials struggled to process what they had just witnessed. My parents found themselves at the center of media attention they were completely unprepared to handle. Patricia's first instinct was damage control through desperate reinvention of reality. She approached the nearest reporter with a forced smile that looked more like a medical condition, her voice unnaturally bright, as she began constructing an alternative narrative on the spot. "We are so incredibly proud of Ambrose," she announced loudly enough for surrounding families to hear clearly. "As his mother, I always knew he had extraordinary potential. Gerald and I have supported his technology interests from the very beginning." The words sounded rehearsed, despite being completely improvised, as if she had spent years practicing for a moment she never expected to encounter. Gerald joined her performance with equally artificial enthusiasm, suddenly transformed into a supportive father who had always believed in his son's vision. Ambrose gets his innovative thinking from our family. Gerald declared to anyone within earshot his legal training, helping him project confidence even while internally panicking. We encouraged him to pursue his passion for artificial intelligence because we recognized his exceptional abilities. Their desperate attempt to claim credit for achievements they had actively opposed was both pathetic and infuriating to witness. Years of emotional abuse and systematic rejection were being rewritten in real time as supportive parenting and wise guidance. Marcus joined their performance with obvious reluctance, clearly uncomfortable with the dishonesty, but unwilling to abandon family loyalty publicly. Our parents always emphasized the importance of hard work and innovation. He told reporters the words coming out stiffly because he knew how untrue they were. Jennifer stood beside Marcus with growing confusion and suspicion. As someone who had witnessed recent family dynamics firsthand, she recognized the massive contradiction between my parents' current claims and their actual behavior. Her questions to Marcus became increasingly direct and uncomfortable. "Why did you tell me your parents were disappointed in Ambrose?" she whispered urgently during a brief break in the media attention. "You said they thought he was a failure. How does that match with what they're saying now?" Sarah appeared at my side during the height of the media circus, providing emotional support while I navigated questions about the Tech Vision partnership. Her presence reminded me that not all relationships were based on conditions and expectations that some people could love and support without demanding conformity to their vision of success. "How does it feel to prove everyone wrong?" One reporter asked me directly, clearly fishing for quotes about family conflict that would make better television. My response was measured and diplomatic, despite the obvious opportunity for public revenge. "Success isn't about proving anyone wrong," I replied carefully. "It's about pursuing your vision, even when others don't understand it." I'm grateful for this opportunity and excited about the potential impact of this technology. The restraint in my answers only highlighted the desperation in my parents' increasingly elaborate claims about their supportive role in my achievements. Their fictional narrative grew more detailed with each interview, incorporating specific examples of encouragement and guidance that had never actually happened. Dr. Rodriguez joined our group as media attention intensified her presence, providing academic credibility to my achievements while subtly undermining my parents' revisionist history. When reporters asked about my development process, her answers revealed the truth about my isolation and independent work. Ambrose developed this technology entirely through his own initiative and vision, she explained with professional precision. He worked countless hours in our computer lab, often alone, driven by passion that impressed everyone who witnessed his dedication. The growing crowd of relatives and family friends created additional pressure on my parents to maintain their performance while answering increasingly specific questions about their knowledge of my work. Uncle Thomas proved particularly persistent in his interrogation. "When did Ambrose first tell you about the Tech Vision negotiations?" He demanded, his tone suggesting he suspected something was amiss. "A $15 million deal doesn't happen overnight. You must have been involved in the process." Gerald's responses became more evasive, with each question his legal training helping him avoid direct lies while creating impressions that were completely false. We respected Ambrose's need for confidentiality during sensitive business negotiations. He claimed, making it sound like supportive parenting rather than complete ignorance. The turning point came when Linda Chen, an investigative reporter for the regional business publication, approached our group with documents that changed everything. Her research into the family dynamics behind this extraordinary story had uncovered public records that exposed my parents' carefully constructed lies. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," She began with the directness of someone who had done her homework thoroughly. I have copies of disownment papers filed in Connecticut Superior Court just 3 days ago. These documents legally terminate your parental relationship with Ambrose and remove him from all family financial assets. The silence that followed her statement was deafening. Every conversation in our immediate vicinity stopped as people processed the implications of what they had just heard. Camera operators swung their equipment toward my parents, capturing their expressions as the fictional narrative collapsed completely. The filing date on these documents is May 15th. Chen continued relentlessly, just 72 hours before today's graduation ceremony. The language specifically references disappointment with academic performance and concerns about family reputation. Patricia's face crumpled as she realized that their private family decisions had become public record accessible to anyone with basic research skills. The legal documentation made their current claims about supportive parenting look absurd to anyone with functioning brain cells. Could you explain the timing of these legal actions relative to today's business announcement? Chen pressed her questions, exposing the complete contradiction between their legal choices and their current public statements. Gerald attempted damage control through legal technicalities, but his explanations sounded increasingly desperate. Family decisions are complex, he stammered, and legal documents don't always reflect the full emotional picture. The extended family members' reaction shifted from confusion to anger as they understood the scope of deception they were witnessing. Aunt Carol confronted Patricia directly, her voice carrying across the venue as family unity disintegrated publicly. "You legally disowned your son 3 days before his graduation?" she demanded, her outrage obvious to everyone watching. "While he was negotiating a $15 million business deal? What kind of parents do something like that?" The media feeding frenzy intensified as reporters recognized the human drama unfolding alongside the business story. Local television coverage expanded to include family dynamics and the broader questions about success recognition and parental support that resonated with audiences. Marcus found himself caught between loyalty to our parents and growing awareness of how wrong their actions had been. Jennifer's questions became increasingly pointed as she realized the man she planned to marry came from a family capable of such calculated cruelty. "You knew about the disownment," she accused Marcus quietly but intensely. "You knew they were cutting him off, and you didn't try to stop them. How could you let this happen to your own brother?" Social media amplified the story throughout the afternoon as attendees shared photos and videos of the graduation ceremony. Hashtags about family betrayal and unexpected success began trending regionally, turning our personal drama into a broader conversation about family dynamics and support. My parents' desperate attempts to control the narrative became increasingly futile as more details emerged about their systematic rejection of my achievements. Every interview revealed additional contradictions between their current claims and their documented behavior. The most devastating moment came when someone shared video footage from Marcus's medical school graduation, clearly showing that I had been excluded from family celebrations and photos. The visual evidence of their preferential treatment made their current claims about equal support look ridiculous. As the day progressed and media attention continued building, my parents faced the impossible task of explaining decisions that looked increasingly indefensible. Their reputation in Connecticut's social circles, built over decades of careful cultivation, was crumbling in real time as their true character was exposed. The humiliation they experienced wasn't something I had orchestrated or desired, but rather the natural consequence of choices they had made freely over many years. They had created this situation through calculated cruelty, and now they faced the public accountability they had never expected. The months following graduation transformed not just my own life, but the dynamics of an entire family that had to confront the consequences of their choices. The immediate media attention subsided after a few weeks, but the deeper implications of what had happened continued reverberating through everyone involved. My response to the chaos was deliberately measured and graceful. During follow-up interviews, I consistently emphasized forgiveness and moving forward rather than dwelling on past conflicts. Success isn't about proving people wrong, I repeated in various forms. It's about pursuing your vision with integrity and determination. This approach wasn't motivated by weakness or fear, but by understanding that true strength comes from rising above the need for revenge. My parents had already faced the most devastating consequence possible, discovering they had rejected and discarded the very success they claimed to value most. Within 6 months, my new life had taken shape in ways I had barely dared to imagine. The Tech Vision partnership exceeded even Hart's optimistic projections, with my artificial intelligence software generating results that attracted attention from financial institutions worldwide. The ongoing royalties from licensing agreements provided financial security that dwarfed anything my family had ever possessed. Sarah and I moved to a beautiful apartment in Boston, where Tech Vision maintained their primary research facility. Our relationship deepened as we built a life based on mutual respect and shared values rather than obligation and expectation. Her analytical brilliance complemented my technical innovation perfectly, and we began collaborating on projects that pushed the boundaries of what artificial intelligence could accomplish. The engagement happened on a quiet evening in our apartment, with no family drama or social pressure influencing the decision. Sarah's acceptance felt like the final confirmation that I had found someone who valued me for who I actually was, rather than who they wanted me to become. Dr. Rodriguez became more than just a mentor. She evolved into a trusted advisor who helped me navigate the business world while maintaining academic integrity. Her guidance proved invaluable as opportunities expanded beyond the initial Tech Vision partnership. "You have a gift for seeing patterns others miss," she reminded me regularly. "Don't let success change that fundamental curiosity." The consequences for my parents were swift and severe within their social circles. Connecticut's wealthy communities operated on reputation and perception, and the public exposure of their treatment toward me destroyed carefully cultivated images built over decades. Gerald's law practice suffered as potential clients questioned his judgment and character. Legal professionals who had respected his expertise began wondering how someone who could so completely misjudge his own son's potential could be trusted with their important cases. Several high-profile clients quietly transferred their business to other firms. Patricia's social standing evaporated even more dramatically. Charity boards and social organizations that had valued her participation began distancing themselves from someone who had become associated with family cruelty and poor judgment. The invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving, and former friends avoided her calls. Their marriage faced unprecedented stress as they blamed each other for the decisions that had led to their public humiliation. Gerald accused Patricia of being too harsh in her criticism, while she insisted that his legal advice about the disownment had been catastrophically wrong. Marcus initially tried to defend our parents' actions, but his relationship with Jennifer couldn't survive her growing awareness of his family's character. She broke their engagement after months of arguments about values and integrity, unable to accept marriage into a family capable of such calculated cruelty. "I can't build a life with someone who would stand by and watch his parents destroy his brother," she explained during their final conversation. "What would happen to our children if they didn't meet your family's expectations?" The loss of Jennifer devastated Marcus in ways he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in his life, he experienced rejection based on his family's behavior rather than his own actions. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was paying the price for supporting parents who had caused irreparable damage. 6 months after graduation, Marcus reached out to me through a carefully worded letter that acknowledged his role in enabling our parents' behavior. His apology was genuine and detailed, recognizing specific instances where he could have intervened but chose family loyalty instead. We met for coffee in a neutral location where he could express his regrets without family pressure or media attention. The conversation was difficult, but healing as he finally understood the emotional damage that years of systematic rejection had caused. I was so focused on being the perfect son that I never considered what that meant for you, he admitted with obvious pain. I watched them hurt you repeatedly and told myself it wasn't my responsibility to intervene. Our relationship began rebuilding slowly based on his genuine remorse and commitment to change. He couldn't undo years of enabling their cruelty, but he could acknowledge the harm and work toward becoming the brother I had needed him to be. The extended family members who had witnessed the graduation drama became advocates for repairing family relationships, but their efforts met resistance from Gerald and Patricia, who remained convinced they had been unfairly vilified. Uncle Thomas made several attempts to facilitate family meetings, but my parents' refusal to acknowledge their mistakes made reconciliation impossible. They continued insisting that their actions had been motivated by love and concern, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The most profound change was in my own understanding of what family actually means. Growing up, I had accepted that love came with conditions, and that acceptance required conformity to others' expectations. The contrast between my parents' conditional approval and the unconditional support I found from Sarah Dr. Rodriguez, and eventually Marcus, taught me that family is defined by behavior rather than biology. My grandmother Rose had tried to teach me this lesson years earlier, but I hadn't fully understood it until I experienced both rejection and acceptance as an adult. Her belief in my potential had planted seeds that eventually grew into the confidence necessary to pursue my vision despite family opposition. The business success continued expanding in ways that validated every risk I had taken. TechVision's partnership evolved into joint ventures with other technology companies, creating opportunities to influence entire industries. The financial rewards were significant, but the professional satisfaction of seeing my innovations create positive change was even more meaningful. 2 years after graduation, I established the Rose Harrison Innovation Fund, named after my grandmother, and dedicated to supporting students whose families couldn't or wouldn't recognize their potential. The fund provided scholarships, mentoring, and emotional support for young innovators who faced family opposition to their dreams. Every student deserves at least one person who believes in their vision, I explained during the fund's announcement ceremony. Sometimes that support has to come from outside the family, and that's perfectly acceptable. Dr. Rodriguez became the fund's academic director, using her experience to identify and support students whose potential was being overlooked or actively discouraged. The program's first recipients included young people from various backgrounds who shared the common experience of family rejection for pursuing unconventional paths. The deepest life lesson that emerged from this experience was understanding that validation must come from within rather than from others' approval. My parents' rejection had been devastating because I still needed their acceptance to feel complete. True success only became possible when I stopped requiring their permission to pursue my vision. Success without family support taught me self-reliance that proved invaluable in business negotiations and personal relationships. When you've learned to believe in yourself despite systematic discouragement, external challenges become much more manageable. The irony was that my parents' cruelty had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible: the motivation to prove that their assessment of my worth was completely wrong. Their rejection forced me to develop inner strength and independent vision that wouldn't have been necessary if they had provided unconditional support. 3 years after graduation, Gerald and Patricia made their first attempt at reconciliation through a formal letter acknowledging some mistakes in their approach. The letter was clearly drafted by Gerald's legal mind, focusing on procedural errors rather than emotional damage. My response was gracious but honest about the conditions necessary for any relationship moving forward. Reconciliation requires genuine acknowledgement of harm caused and demonstrated commitment to change, I wrote back. Legal apologies for procedural mistakes don't address the emotional damage that needs healing. They weren't ready for that level of accountability, and I had learned to accept that some relationships can't be repaired when one side refuses to acknowledge the full scope of damage they caused. Peace came from understanding that their limitations didn't define my worth or determine my happiness. The final lesson was recognizing that sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply give us exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be. My parents' rejection forced me to develop resilience, vision, and independence that served me well in every area of life. Looking back from a position of success and happiness, I could see that their cruelty had been a catalyst for growth rather than an insurmountable obstacle. They had intended to break my spirit, but instead they had forged it into something stronger than they could have imagined. Today I work from an office that overlooks Boston Harbor, surrounded by evidence of achievements that began in a lonely computer lab where I learned to believe in myself despite family rejection. A photo of Grandmother Rose sits on my desk as a reminder that unconditional love exists even when it doesn't come from expected sources. Sarah and I are building the kind of family we both dreamed of. One based on support, understanding, and celebrating each other's authentic selves rather than demanding conformity to predetermined expectations. Our future children will grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions and that their worth isn't dependent on others' approval. The greatest victory wasn't the financial success or public recognition, but learning that happiness and fulfillment are possible even when the people who should love us most choose rejection instead. That knowledge is worth more than any amount of money and provides strength that no one can take away. The business continues growing, the relationships continue deepening, and the future continues looking brighter than I ever dared to imagine during those dark years when I thought my family's approval was necessary for my happiness. It turns out that the best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's building a life so fulfilling that their opinion becomes irrelevant. What struck you most about this journey from family rejection to unexpected success? Have you ever had to choose between following your dreams and meeting others' expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it who might need this reminder that family approval isn't required for personal success. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming obstacles and building the life you actually want rather than the one others expect you to live. And please share this story with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' recognition, that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as rejection, and that the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you're born into. Thank you for listening to this story about learning that true success comes from pursuing your authentic vision with integrity and determination, regardless of who believes in you along the way. Remember that your dreams are valid even when others don't understand them, and that sometimes the best thing people can do for your growth is get out of your way. Until next time, keep believing in your vision and building the life that makes you genuinely proud to be who you are.